This show is brought to you by Asino Resources.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's 8/27/19. Well, we're looking at trade wars. We're looking at negative interest rates, inverted yield curves. We're looking at the commercials are actually underwater in their metals positions. Who would believe that could be possible? But yet, it's happened. It's happening now. Well, let's see where we go from here. Questions, comments. Where do you think the price of gold is heading? Let me know. Just email us kl@kerrylutz.com. Well, John Rubino is with us here. And John, who would have thunk? We could be in this position. Gold was up $40 last night. Now it's up $1 and change right now as we speak, but they haven't been able to make it go red. What are you thinking?
Hey, Kerry. Well, yeah, it's hard to know where to start with all the stuff that's happened since you and I talked a couple of weeks ago. I think one of the really interesting things that bears on everything else is that a consensus is starting to form in the U.S. that we are going to get negative interest rates. That's been something that just wasn't a story for us here, though it was a story for a lot of other people in the rest of the world. But now all of a sudden, with the Fed starting to ease and Trump pushing aggressively for more easing and the economy maybe slowing down, the mainstream consensus seems to be that, we're going to get negative interest rates pretty soon. And that's a huge deal. I know it hasn't been for the rest of the world, but somewhere down there is a number that we can't go below. And if the Fed thinks it's going to cut interest rates the usual 5 percentage points at the short end of the yield curve in order to combat the next recession, then we're way down in negative territory. So that it's coming. And that pretty much drives a lot of the rest of the stuff that's happening now because, as you said, gold is going up. And that shouldn't be a surprise if we think we're going to get negative interest rates here because gold is at record levels in a lot of other countries around the world.
73 other countries.
Yeah. Yeah, in part because their interest rates are so low that makes gold attractive relative to financial paper. And also in part because of what that says about the local economy. If you have to cut your interest rates to negative levels in order to keep the economy from dropping into a depression, that's a pretty big admission of weakness, right? And it also means that you've got nowhere to go because if that doesn't work, what do you do and where do you go? Do you keep on cutting interest rates until you're at double-digit negative interest rates? Most people intuitively would say that probably won't work. And economists are kind of revising their theories now because they used to talk about the zero bound, which was the place where you can't go any further with interest rates. In other words, zero. Because when interest rates are negative, it distorts the financial system. That didn't completely happen in a lot of places where there's negative interest rates. So now they talk about the effective lower bound, which is to say that number that we can't go past, but we don't know what the number is. So we can't name the number, but we'll find out if we keep going. So it's a mess. And it's very favorable for inflation hedges and safe haven assets like gold and silver, which explains a big part of why they've been going up lately. But there's other stuff going on too now. The trade war with China, I think originally a lot of people, including me, thought that this was going to be a deal that gets cut. They negotiate for a while, they threaten a little bit, and then they sign off on something that's not really that notable, sort of like the NAFTA revision, which nobody even knows how this NAFTA is different from the previous NAFTA. And something like that would happen and Trump would declare victory right before the election and that would be that. But this has a really different tone to it. It's a lot more dark and contentious. And there's a consensus is forming that this might go on for a long time and it might actually never be resolved. This might just
decoupling.
be like a Vietnam kind of thing. It's a quagmire. We can't get out of.
Well, when you look at it, Yeah, granted, maybe the Chinese can do a lot of mayhem and mischief, with the dollar and all that. But in the final analysis, they're selling us like 550 billion worth of stuff and buying 150 billion. So doesn't sound like they're really in the position of strength. It's the debtor owning the bank, so to speak. And what happens?
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of they're lowering the value of their currency as a way of threatening the U.S. In other words, they're saying, look, we can do this. We can cut the value of our currency really dramatically
to a point
if you force us into. And Trump is responding to that with demands or with complaints that the dollar is too strong. And that is leading to a lot of talk about a currency war. Which is also really disruptive for the global financial system.
That's terrible.
All of these things happen. They've happened in the past, pretty much, other than sharply negative interest rates. And it caused a lot of turmoil while it happened. We got through it, but it wasn't pleasant, and it wasn't a safe place to be if you were in high PE ratio stocks, for instance, or government bonds that don't yield anything. You don't want to be in assets like that during a currency war. So the fact that there's a prospect of that too, on top of everything else, just adds to the sense of foreboding out there in the financial markets right now.
And there's a lot of speculation that we are potentially heading for some type of financial crisis come the fall. And this is the time of year where financial crises usually occur. And we got European banks are on the ropes. We've got quiet bank runs, at least in one or more European banks. And they're bringing the money over here, which is another reason. And then the Chinese can lower, depreciate their currency all they like. But that doesn't help the psychology of the Chinese investors, right? That isn't going to stop them or encourage them to keep their money in China. In fact, what it's going to do is increase the amount of flight capital. So maybe they'll bail out the Vancouver real estate market yet again. There's a lot of negative implications for what's happening now.
Well, yeah. When a currency is being inflated away or depreciated rapidly, that does lead to capital play. You're right. People rightly want to get their money out of the system in which the currency is falling that hard. Then the government usually responds with capital controls, where they say, you can only move X amount, a minuscule amount per month or per year out of the country. And then that used to send gold and silver through the roof, because those were two of the vehicles for capital flight. But Bitcoin has been getting more of that action lately because it's frictionless. And a big part of the jumps we've seen in Bitcoin's price at various times during its existence have had to do with one country or another having some kind of capital flight issue and capital controls issue. And so people were bypassing the capital controls by buying Bitcoin and then just shifting it overseas. So it wouldn't be a surprise if Bitcoin was a big part of this mix, or cryptos in general were a big part of the mix, just because they are perceived to be a good vehicle for moving your money overseas in a hurry. So yeah, that all this stuff is happening at once makes it very hard to predict.
Yeah,
how it all shakes out, because a lot of these things and equity market valuation or volatility, which we've seen lately, is a good indicator of how hard it is to predict what's going to happen when stuff like this really gets going. Because the financial markets basically are trying to figure out whether this is a good thing or a bad thing that's happening right now. For instance, a currency war, in one sense, is good for equities because stock prices tend to go up in local currency terms when a currency is being devalued aggressively. So maybe you want to buy stocks in that kind of a circumstance. The dollar is looking like the target of a lot of this flight currency, which maybe means the dollar stays stronger than most other currencies, which helps the U.S. At least in the short run. It helps the value of the dollar, but that hurts our exports, leading the president to call for a weaker dollar. So all of this stuff has secondary and tertiary effects that then combine with the secondary effects of the other things that are happening. So it's very hard to sketch out one roadmap for all of this that gets us to a certain place. And that's why you and I keep coming back to gold and silver, because historically that's been the final destination in a big crisis for terrified capital. And people end up in precious metals because those are the things that tend to hold up when things get incomprehensible. And so it shouldn't be a surprise that gold and silver have been going up lately. And there's one other thing too. Trump just lately defined China as an enemy, and then implied that Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Fed, was a bigger enemy than China. And and so I know this is the anti-Trump media where this stuff is showing up anyhow. So you have to take it for what take it based on the source. But a lot of stuff has been coming out lately questioning his sanity.
Yeah.
And it's not a completely mainstream thing yet. Like, it hasn't made it over to, obviously, to Trump supporters. But that kind of stuff is being said on major media outlets about the president just adds to the crazy atmosphere that we have right now. Because if we don't trust the president, and he's telling us not to trust the Fed, and China is now an enemy, not just a competitor in trade. Oh, and Israel is bombing a bunch of Middle Eastern countries. Have you seen that lately?
Yep, I've been seeing that. Yeah. So
they probably wouldn't do that without a go-ahead from the U.S., which implies that we're starting a proxy war in the Middle East, where our allies are doing the fighting. So that's another thing. There's just a lot of stuff, Gary. I don't know. I have no idea how this all plays out, whether you should buy stocks or bonds. High-grade bonds might do great. Well, in a negative interest rate environment, getting there is great for bond prices, right?
Yeah.
So you can have big capital gains in treasuries that today yield 1.5%.
And they might
if that yield
minus
negative 1.5%.
Yeah.
and so the uncertainty level, I mean, in all the time you and I have been talking, it's always been uncertain. We've always been making huge mistakes. We've always been accumulating too much debt and doing other stupid things. And it was always going to come back to bite us. But now we've got this, it's qualitatively different here. It's not just math, it's just not just a number getting bigger. It's the behavior of people and their statements that has kind of spun out of control in a way. So I guess that's always the inevitable result of too much debt. So it began with the numbers, and now it's metastasizing over into behavior. But God,
didn't somebody write a series of articles why we're ungovernable?
Yeah, I need to resurrect.
You better update that one, boy. You must be on 15 or 20 by now.
Oh, there were so many examples back in the day.
But now it's getting worse.
It became kind of redundant after a while to talk about us being ungovernable, because everywhere you look, there's examples of it. So pretty soon you run through all the countries that you can profile in a series like that. And but I guess you're right. There's new evidence of ungovernability out there that probably needs to be chronicled.
Further, well, it's not just more evidence, it's intensification of the trend, It really is like what will happen next to make it even less governable. Hey, do you think we should just march into Greenland and take it?
See, that's just another example of, actually, it's an example of several things about Trump. One, he says this thing and everybody says, oh my God, that's crazy. Is he on drugs? No, he doesn't do drugs. He's just like that.
He doesn't even do caffeine or alcohol.
But then people start thinking about it and they say, you know what? It'd be pretty cool if we bought Greenland. And so that actually came full circle, and Trump's getting sort of kind of some credit for an audacious idea that would actually be good if we could do it.
I'll bet there is gold in Greenland, and we know there's uranium.
All kinds of stuff in Greenland.
Never been explored for anything.
See, that's the ultimate global warming play. That in Siberia, right? Those are the two things you want to own in a world that's 4 degrees warmer than it is today.
Probably Iceland too. Iceland's probably pretty good.
Iceland, someone told me, is actually kind of temperate. they have a reasonably nice
because they've got the geothermal energy and all those hot springs and stuff that come up, and they're not as big as Greenland, so I guess they're right next to it. But
they're a little island next to a really big island.
Yeah, geopolitically, Greenland makes total sense for the United States to acquire it, and it's semi-autonomous. So I guess the people there, supposedly there was a survey done, and 80% of them want to be part of the U.S. So you could make Greenland a state and Puerto Rico a state. So then we'd have 52 states, right?
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Be sure to take a look at Ross Beatty-backed Osino Resources, a gold explorer in mining-friendly Namibia. Osino's district-scale land package is near 2 producing gold mines. Osino's management team previously developed and sold one of them to B2 Gold. Its founders and management are experienced mining professionals. In the past 7 years, they successfully developed and sold 2 companies. Osino's excellent shareholder base includes Ross Beatty, owning 20%, insiders at 5%, and resource capital funds with 8%. Drills are turning, exploration is ongoing, so you'll definitely want to pay attention to Osino. It trades in New York under the ticker symbol OSILF and in Toronto under the ticker OSI. Find out more, go to OsinoResources.com. That's OsinoResources.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Yeah. So what do you think Greenland would, how would their votes skew? Would they offset Puerto Rico and would they be a Republican state? Because, you want to check that out.
Yeah, they got to balance.
Before you buy a new state, if you're the Republican president, right? You want to make sure that you're not just creating a new Democrat state.
Hey, and it is the biggest island in the world, and Trump's a real estate guy. It just works on so many levels.
I mean, that was the first reaction to this was, okay, you elect a real estate guy. What do you think he's going to do? Yeah, he's trying to acquire new property.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Especially if Alaska's melting and the Aleutian Islands, all that is melting, we're going to have less land. So we need to make it up. So maybe Greenland is the perfect complement to that. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
But, he also said, supposedly, why can't we just nuke a hurricane? Which isn't that outrageous because they had theorized doing it before. They never actually did it. And, it's never been tried, obviously. But, that he's denying that he said. The Greenland thing he admits, but that he denies.
Yeah, let's not nuke hurricanes or other storms or anything like that.
Yeah, well, if it's a Category 5 coming at Florida and they think they could neutralize it by nuking it, I might be in favor, depending where it's going to hit in the state.
Yeah, but if it goes off in the hurricane and the hurricane doesn't stop, then you have a radioactive hurricane coming your way. So I think in the end, we're just going to have to live with the consequences of putting 25 million people on the Florida coast.
Yeah, I guess so.
Gary, remember that's more cheap real estate for you. Every time a hurricane comes through,
we're all in favor of.
There's all kinds of fixer-uppers after that.
Oh, that's all there is.
Yeah.
If you look at places where it's happened, geez. But seriously, this is really getting weird now, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is getting weird. And the thing is, multi-pronged weirdness like this is very hard just to fix because no one thing is going to fix this, right? No. There's no Fed action that gets us out of this because if they raise interest rates, everything falls apart. If they cut interest rates, we enter uncharted territory with potentially horrendous consequences. Stocks could go way up from here, but that doesn't fix anything. That just creates an even bigger bubble that will burst in a more dramatic way when the time comes. And this trade war thing, we could just stop it. But then remember, there was a reason why it got started. If we just walk away from it right now, then our manufacturing economy continues to hollow out in the U.S.
Right.
And that's a trend that inevitably leads to, a dysfunctional economy because we're not making stuff anymore. We're cutting each other's hair and trading each other's stocks and things like that.
Suing each other, paying lawyers to sue each other in court, which is a real great use of allocation of scarce resources. Yeah, just let's make our courts bigger so there'll be more court clerks, more judges. Everything will be great.
Yeah.
There's one trend that is going to hit, and it's going to hit with a viciousness like you've never seen. The internet is the great destroyer of all entrenched industries, right? Look at taxi cabs, Uber, look at Airbnb. Hasn't really hit the hotel industry yet, because the hotel industry has been booming for years, and they keep, ripping people off with high rates and resort fees and, $18 hamburgers. The hotels are a total ripoff. Airbnb, next recession, and the hotels will be boarded up all over the place when that day comes.
Well,
so
see, that's terrible for the hotel owners and managers, and
brought it on themselves.
Uber's terrible for taxi drivers, but that's an example of creative destruction in capitalism, which is always happening, and usually ends up being a very good thing after the initial turmoil happens, because it replaces less efficient way of doing something with a much more efficient way of doing it.
Yeah.
So this is great stuff. We have a lot of really positive technological trends, and we should probably bring those up more often to kind of balance the gloom and doom finance and geopolitics.
Yeah, I meant to do that. So, but the next thing that's going to happen is the legal profession and the courts, because people will go, assuming they don't start shooting at each other to settle disputes. And that's the purpose of the courts, is so people don't shoot it out, because like in the drug trade, there's no taking it to court and having a judge decide, that your heroin was impure and, breach of warranty of fitness for a particular purpose, right? So that's why you can't do it, and that's why they have to shoot it out, or I'll sue you because, you didn't pay all the money I fronted for the drugs. Courts can't handle that. So, but that's the purpose of the courts, is so we don't devolve into, settling things like at sundown, and so there is going to be a massive repudiation of the courts and the legal profession, all right, through the internet. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work yet, but I know that this is going to happen, John, because if there's any profession, and having been a lawyer for 30 years and now a recovering attorney, if there's any profession where there is universal dissatisfaction with all of the players, it is the legal profession, which means it's ripe for a substitute. And we're going to see that. I don't know.
I don't know how they replace the courts, but artificial intelligence is replacing lawyers already, where
well, they sound smarter already.
Oh yeah, they have expert systems that can look up precedent more accurately than an associate lawyer can, or can set you up with a standard contract.
Right. Oh yeah,
much more quickly than a person can do it.
I use them myself. Start out with it and then add what I want.
Yeah,
it's a lot faster.
And so that's lopping off the bottom couple of rungs of the legal profession. We're automating it. So that raises the question of, how do you get lawyers who are 2 or 3 rungs up doing the really expert stuff if they never get a chance to do the basic stuff? We'll see how that works. Maybe AI will just keep on moving up faster.
AI indeed possible, but you just need that human touch. But I do believe, like, there's a company I was trying to work with, they did like mediations, and they would just tell the guy, they'd have a lawyer listen to both sides. It was very inexpensive, not more than a couple $1,000. And they tell the insurance company, look, this is what you're going to wind up paying if you go to court. They tell the plaintiff's attorney, this is what you're going to wind up getting. And they would settle about 70% of these cases. It was pretty
well, see, that's a new business model that sounds good.
Arbitration's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
But the internet will make these things much cheaper and much easier to do, and need less professional guidance through the system, or actual representation to enable you to present a case and all that. You're going to be able to do that much easier, and it's just going to happen. Maybe the AI will be able to look through all of the exhibits, all of the documents, and figure the stuff out. I don't know what's going to happen, but I can tell you right now that it's been unsustainable. Look, if you had hotels and people hated 90% of them, do you think there'd be a hotel industry? There wouldn't be. They've got a monopoly right now, but I think that the internet will get rid of the monopoly in the legal profession. One other thing I want to talk to you, I've been a big naysayer about electric cars. Not so much a naysayer. I don't want to say that because I always love the concept of them, but a skeptic as far as the adoption rates, etc. But now with the Tesla 3, and that's without the new batteries, they just acquired a company called Maxwell Technologies that will enable their batteries eventually to give them double the range of what they are now, make them cheaper, 20% lighter, etc. But even without that, when you look at the 5-year cost of ownership of a Tesla Model 3, an Audi A4, and I think it was like a Honda Civic or a Toyota whatever, the bottom line Toyota, the 5-year cost of ownership of the Tesla is actually less because the service is much less and obviously the fuel's a lot less. So
that's for the Teslas that don't spontaneously explode.
That's, right? What I realized is a lot of the negative stuff coming out about the Teslas is just from other auto companies who are lined up and their allies to try to bring them down. The fact is the Tesla Model 3 is the safest car ever to be evaluated by the NHTSA, the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, that rates 5 stars. It's 5 stars, but the second and third is the Tesla Model S and the Tesla Model X.
Yeah.
So they're safer than anything else out there, and they're going to have the full automated autonomous driving mode, supposedly the end of this year, but probably next year. I mean,
yeah. And Kerry, remember, this is just, first generation electric cars or second generation.
This is way ahead of that. This is like for 100 years, the most sacred event of the year for the auto industry was the model introduction, new model intro. Mm-hmm. And Tesla has stood that on its head because they don't really change models. They change the technology and there will be upgrades, but your Tesla that you buy today in 2 years is going to be a better car than the car you got today. But again, we have battery constraints. It looks like they're getting over them. We have grid constraints because it would represent a tremendous tax, tremendous challenge, stress to the existing electrical grid. But I'm beginning to think that stuff like this is going to be worked out. And these cars are going, I was a big skeptic on Tesla, but I think they've gotten rid of most of it. And they're selling, 300 to maybe 500,000 cars a year, which has never been done in the U.S. and in Western countries since like the end of World War II. There hasn't been a new car company that's ever gained traction. So this thing is for real now. My next car will probably be a Tesla Model 3 performance model, because the other thing is it'll go from 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds and just about give you a whiplash. The handling, it's one of these blobby things because it feels like you're really controlling the car, but all the computers, it's electronic steering, drive-by-wire, so you don't really control anything that the car does. The computer's telling it what to do, and you're just along for the ride. So now the computer will just run the car. And, like the idea of like just going from here to California and the thing programs in the stops for the charging stations, and it tells you how much to charge and how long you should be there. And, this car has got a lot of amazing tech. And now they've got a new bus that they've invented that will eliminate the need for hundreds of miles of wiring in the vehicles, which will enable them to bang them out probably 20 or 30% faster than they can now. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. And again, this is just early in the emergence of electric cars, and anything that's a problem today will be fixed over the next 5 or 10 years. And we might not even have batteries at that point, because
Hydrogen
fuel
cells.
cells are very interesting, and they look like they can fall in cost more rapidly than today's lithium-ion batteries can. So it's possible that fuel cells get cheaper than batteries somewhere out there and turn out to be safer. Although, they have hydrogen, which is a flammable gas too. So, that stuff will have to be dealt with, but they'll figure it out. And they will definitely at least be a huge part of the car market in 10 years and maybe be the biggest part sometime after that. It's a fascinating revolution to watch.
And they have no competition. None of these electric cars coming on the market can hold a candle to them because they don't have the database of all of the, self-driving autonomous data that's there. They don't have the battery technology. They can't obtain it, which Tesla has obtained through experience. 400,000 vehicles on the road. They've learned a heck of a lot more about electric cars than anyone else. And, I think there'll be different battery technology, ultra capacitors. This company they bought, Maxwell Technologies, is a master in ultra capacitors, which enable you to fill up these capacitors right away. And then that leads to a whole bunch of other things. So Musk is eccentric, but the fact of the matter is, the boring company, the idea of having tunnels that just make the cars go 120 miles an hour autonomously. They're going to build one in California, 74 miles long. And he's brought down the cost of doing this tunneling from, in New York, it's $1 billion a mile, John, to $10 million a mile because of the technology, these moles that they've come up with. So it's pretty spectacular that he might actually pull this off. You know what it all boils down to, though? Whether or not Tesla and Musk is going to be successful. All depends on the price of debt, whether investors are willing to keep putting money up, even though it's losing money,
Yeah.
Cheap money.
And that's not a done deal with something like Tesla or with Netflix. These companies that are using junk bonds to finance rapid growth at the bleeding edge of a new technology. Traditionally, they aren't the ones who end up running the technology later on. They don't win. And so it's not clear that Tesla or Netflix will end up being the ones who dominate the technology in the future. But they're making good runs at it.
Oh, yeah.
Tesla's doing better than I thought they would.
But everyone.
Their cash flow issues are still very real.
The cash flow wasn't so bad. They lost a lot of money. But, the other thing is they built a moat effectively. The superchargers out there, they'll only do Teslas. Funny how that works. And they got 14,000 of them in the U.S. By the end of the year, they'll probably be up to 20 or 30,000. And nobody else has the network. You buy a Nissan Leaf, you got to go to the dealer and they have 2 of them. And Tesla's map will tell you how many people are ahead of you at the supercharger and how long you're going to have to wait to use it. Now, I was a big skeptic, but I see that they've addressed a lot of the issues. And when you look at their loss, they lost $4 billion, but, not losing a lot on the cars, continuing to bring the costs down, and they're spending massively on infrastructure. So, when you look at all this stuff, they've got a chance at it here,
Well, good for them. I love these kinds of revolutions. Solar is probably the biggest one right now that we're seeing, but there's a lot of others out there, and electric cars are one of them. So again, there's a lot of amazingly cool stuff happening in the world.
Oh, very much.
And it's happening against the backdrop of just financial chaos, but these technologies are real. And whatever happens in the next 10 years in the financial system, we will come out of the other end of it with the things that seem revolutionary right now being mature, dominant technologies that are much, much better than what we have today.
Hey, you know what? You know how much Tesla brought in on revenue last year? They pulled in $21.5 billion in revenue, up from 11, almost 12 the year before. And they're just putting tons of money out there. So fact is, they're probably, if there's a chance they can make it, they just might do it. Anyways, I know you got to go. I got to go as well. So make sure you check out John's site, dollarcollapse.com. Check us out, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. John, is an interesting time to be alive for sure. And this thing keeps getting crazier and crazier and crazier. We didn't even have a chance to talk about the likely impending end of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and what that's going to do to things. Because if the Republicans get that and Trump appoints somebody, 6-3 on the Supreme Court, then we're really going to see people going out of their minds. I didn't mention the price of Bitcoin's down to $10,257.90. It's been kind of around there since the contest. John, anyways, we'll see you next week, and be well.
Thanks, Gary. You too.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.